Hello my sweet friends, welcome back. We're back with another book video. Today I'm going to be doing the mid-year freakout tag. I'm so excited. I'm basically just going to be talking about some of my favorite books of the year, maybe my biggest disappointments, books I'm really excited to read, my fictional crush, my favorite book characters. The questions in this tag are so fun, and honestly just doing a tag genuinely brings me back to like my 2015 YouTube days. And for most of these questions I do have more than one book as my answer because I simply cannot pick just one thing to talk about apparently. But let's get straight into it. So far this year I have read I think just over 70 books at this point in time, and we are just over 6 months through the year. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty shocked at myself. My goal for the year was 100 books and I think I'm on track to complete that. Last year I read 80 books and I felt like I read heaps last year, so the fact that I'm already at 70 blows my mind, but I've just had such a fun reading year. But anyway, the first question is, what is the best book you have read so far this year? If I'm being completely honest, there haven't been that many books this year that have just blown my mind. Like there have been a couple, but really not that many. I've had a lot of books that I'm like, I loved so much of this, but it didn't quite blow me away. Whereas last year in 2021, I feel like I just read so many of my now favorite books. Like I read Evelyn Hugo last year, Daisy Jones, Archer's Voice. I started the Addicted / Calloway Sisters series, The Inheritance Games, Beach Read. So many books that I would consider some of my top favorite reads I didn't read this year. So let me run you through a few of my favorites from 2022. As for romance, we have One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I freaking love TJR's storytelling. I think she is just phenomenal. This book just got me so in my feels and I was just so invested in the story and the characters. I'm probably not going to tell you what all of these books are about because we would just simply be here for too long, but obviously if it's one of my favorite books, I would recommend it. But yeah, I love every book that I've read by Taylor Jenkins Reid, but this is my favorite one that I've read so far this year. I also really loved Most of All You by Mia Sheridan. Again, Mia Sheridan is one of my favorite authors. She is the author of Archer's Voice, and I think a lot of her other books are so underrated, and I'm slowly making my way through her backlist. But this is probably my favorite one that I've read this year, Most of All You. It's not a complete 5-star read for me. Like there are a few things in here that I didn't love, but the story itself was just really beautiful. One of those kind of like healing stories where two broken people find healing, find love, and really just come out the other side better and happier people, which we love to see. Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score was such a surprise to me. I really enjoyed it. It was just a fun time. It's a romance with a plot. Love the small town vibes. I think this book is what made me realize how much I love small town romances. It also has a single parent trope, which I haven't actually read that many books with that trope, but I really enjoyed it in this one, and I definitely want to read more books with that trope. And Better Than the Movies is probably my favorite YA rom-com that I've ever read. It was just such a fun time from beginning to end. It was just fun. Very cheesy, very cringy, but in the best way possible, in my opinion. Of course, ACOTAR. I wouldn't necessarily say that the first book in the series is one of the best books I've read so far this year, but the series as a whole, this series is one of the only books this year that has absolutely blown me away. This is one of those series that like while you're reading it, you already can't wait to reread it. Like that's how I felt reading this series. A 5-star read for me was These Hollow Vows. I just absolutely loved it. This is YA fantasy, girl on a mission to save her sister, subplot of romance. We love to see it. And finally, the Folk of the Air series, the Cruel Prince trilogy. Absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to talk about this more in another question, but this series was just so much fun. Question number 2, what is the best sequel that you have read so far this year? I didn't even have to think twice for this question. It was hands down A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas, which is the sequel to ACOTAR. This book is my personal favorite out of the series, and I know a lot of people agree with me, or I agree with a lot of other people, I guess. I'm definitely late to jump on the ACOTAR bandwagon, but I'm so glad that I made it because this series is just unlike any other. I feel like this book specifically made me fall in love with this series because you get introduced to so many new characters in this book. You really get introduced and you really get to know the inner circle, which is just kind of like the group of main characters that the books follow for the rest of the series. And it is very rare for me to really fall in love with characters, and I truly fell in love with the found family in this book. It is just so beautiful. Because you're spending so much time with these characters, there are so many books in the series, the books themselves are so long, you get to know those itty bitty details about the characters that just make you fall in love. There is a lot of smut in these books, so be aware of that. If you're looking for a fantasy that does not have smut, I would recommend these Hollow Vows, but I just really loved Akamath is the short answer to that question. The third question is, what is a new release that you haven't read yet? To be honest, if there is an author or a series that I love, I keep up with the new releases. Like, I have them literally marked on my calendar if there is a book that I want to get as soon as it is released. So I feel like any of my favorite authors or series that have released new books this year, I have literally got the book and read them straight away. So for me, there wasn't like a super obvious answer to this question, but I decided that probably my most anticipated new release that I haven't picked up yet that's already been released this year is Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. Lynn Painter also wrote Better Than the Movies, which, as I mentioned at the start of the video, is one of my favorite YA rom-coms. I'm pretty sure Mr. Wrong Number is not YA. I think it's an adult romance. If I am wrong, please forgive me. But let me know if you've read it and let me know if it's worth it, because I really enjoyed her writing in Better Than the Movies. It was just, like I said, such a fun time. So if Mr. Wrong Number is anything like Better Than the Movies, I'm sure I'll have a great time. Okay, most anticipated releases for the rest of 2022. I have so many that I'm so excited about. First of all, we have Carrie Soto is Back, of course, by Taylor Jenkins Reid, the final installment in the Hollywood companion series that she has. If you don't know, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones and the Six, Malibu Rising, and Carrie Soto is Back are all linked in some way. Like, they're all set in the same world, just during different time periods and with different characters. But some of the characters overlap in each book, and all three of those other books have been 5-star reads for me. So I am so excited to read Carrie Soto. I have seen people receiving ARCs and starting to read it, and I just absolutely cannot wait to get my hands on my own copy and read it for myself. I also have These Twisted Bonds, which is the sequel to These Hollow Vows, which definitely ended, I don't know if cliffhanger is the right word, but just in a way that did not finalize the character's story. So I'm really excited to read the sequel. Again, I think some people in America have been able to get their hands on it early, but it doesn't release until July 26th here in Australia, which is not that long. Like, it's only a couple weeks away, and that is one of the ones I am most excited to read because I just really love the first book in that series. It Starts With Us, of course. I'm sure a lot of people are mentioning that one, but that is Colleen Hoover's new release coming in October, I'm pretty sure. It is sequel slash prequel based on what I've heard of It Ends With Us, which I loved. I read that one years ago, so I think I'm gonna have to reread it to kind of refresh my memory and kind of remember those little details that I probably won't remember if I don't reread it. But of course, I'm so excited about that one, as I'm sure many people are. And the last one that I have that's like right at the top of my list, along with those others that I have just mentioned, is The Final Gambit, which is the third and final installment of the Inheritance Games trilogy. I love the Inheritance Games and the Hawthorne Legacy. The first two books in that series were 5-star reads for me, and they were just so much fun. I read them last year, otherwise I would have mentioned them in the best book segment of this video, but I think I'm gonna reread the first two before the third one comes out again to refresh my memory and just kind of relive that story, because I just love it, and I'm so intrigued to see what they do in the final book, because I honestly have no idea where the story is gonna go and also which love interest the main character is gonna end up with. I'm not like super passionate about which boy I want her to end up with, because I kind of like them both, but I do have a slight preference. Let me know what team you're on in the comments down below if you have a strong preference, and we'll see if I agree with you. The next question is biggest disappointment of 2022. And this is so sad, you guys, but I think I have to say Book of Night by Holly Black. And what's even more sad is that this book isn't even bad. Like, it's not a bad book, it just did not live up to my expectations, which maybe my expectations were just too high. But Holly Black is the author of the Folk of the Air trilogy, The Cruel Prince, and that series was just such a favorite of mine that when I heard that she was coming out with a new book, I just got so excited, and I really expected it to be a similar experience, and it just simply was not. The Folk of the Air trilogy is a YA fantasy series, whereas this is adult fantasy, and this is much more of like an urban fantasy kind of feel, and I think I just didn't vibe it. And like, good on her for doing something different, it just wasn't the same. But also, in saying that, any book without Carden in it is just not going to be the same, is it? However, I have heard that she's doing like a bit of a spin-off series from the Folk of the Air, and I think writing either I think it's a duology, I could be wrong, about Jude's little brother. I'm so excited for that. But yeah, this book was just not it for me. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be either a duology or the start of a series, and I just don't think I'll be picking up the rest of the series because it just was very meh to me. The next question is, what was your biggest surprise? And I would have to say The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. She has gone back to back with these questions. But the reason why this was the biggest surprise for me personally was because this was my entry, I guess, into the fantasy world. This was the first fantasy book that I read. Before this, I had mostly only read romance, literary fiction. Those were probably like my main genres. And I kind of just picked this out on a whim. Like I had no reason to pick this up apart from I was in the bookstore, I had a voucher, and I was like, this is really calling my name. So I picked it up, did not expect to love it at all. And I became obsessed. Like I devoured this trilogy so quickly. But reading this book truly just opened my eyes into a whole new world of books, and fantasy has just become an absolute love of mine. And I'm still very much at the start of my journey. I don't want to come across like I'm just a fantasy girly now, because there are some people who have read hundreds of fantasy books. Like I'm very much still entering that whole world, but it's just so much fun. I feel like it is the epitome of escapism, and you truly just get so invested in the characters and in the world, and it truly is just such an experience. So thank you so much, The Cruel Prince, for opening my eyes to the fantasy world, because I have just been having so much fun reading fantasy books since then. I read this in January, and since then I've read, I don't know, like 10-15 fantasy books, and some of them have been my absolute favorite books that I've read this year, which is crazy because I never thought I would be into fantasy. My new favorite author, I have to say Sarah J. Maas. I have to. To be fair, I am still yet to read many of her other books, but like I said, I just fell in love with this series, with the world, with the plot, with the characters, especially the characters. And I'm just so excited that there are so many other books of hers that I have yet to read, and I'm so excited to dive into those other worlds. Newest fictional crush. Okay, this was actually kind of hard for me because I genuinely do not have many fictional crushes at all. I'm not the type of girl who comes out of a book and is like, oh my gosh, I loved that guy, he was so beautiful, and like I wish I could marry him in real life, you know? I don't know why, but it just doesn't happen for me like that. Like I see so many girls being like, oh my gosh, obsessed with this guy, and I just don't feel that way. But there are a few fictional boys that I'm just like, wow, they are quite nice, I must say. My number one fictional crush, which isn't necessarily new because this crush began last year, would have to be Lo from the Addicted/Calloway Sisters series. I love Lo. Lauren Hale has my freaking heart. Especially watching his character development over the other books. I haven't finished the series yet. I just finished the 7th book, but I just love him. Like he is just wow. Rach, Connor, I love them in like a found family kind of way. Like I love them as characters, but I'm not like, oh my gosh. Whereas Lo, I'm just like, wow, Lauren Hale. But also in saying that, I love Lily even more. Like I think Lily and I could be best friends. Like you can't tell me that you don't think Lily Calloway and I could be besties. Like think about our personalities. Do you not think we could be besties? So that's probably my biggest fictional crush. But apart from Lo, I've got to say Azriel. He's just quiet and shy and so sweet. I love Azriel. I'm an Azriel stan. I cannot wait for his book, whichever one it ends up being. And I'd also have to say Wes from Better Than the Movies, because he's just so freaking sweet. But yeah, those are my fictional crushes. Newest favorite character. I'm just gonna say these ones quickly because I've already talked about these books way too much, even just in this video, but I would have to say the core 6 from the Addicted/Calloway Sisters series, and of course the Inner Circle from ACOTAR. Like there are just never gonna be characters that I love more than these. I don't think. Well, maybe there will be. But right now, the core 6 and the Inner Circle, there is just like no characters that I've ever read about that I love more than them. If you can't tell, I love found family. It's my absolute favorite trope in the whole world. A book that made you cry. I think there are only 2 that really come to mind from books that I've read this year, and it has to be A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. This one literally made me sob even though I saw what was coming from a million miles away. I could not help myself. It was just so freaking sad. And the other one was Bright Side by Kim Holden, which again, I knew it was gonna be sad. I knew it was gonna happen, but I still sobbed like a baby. So if you want sad books, read those. I don't like sad books typically. Book that made you happy, I would have to say Better Than the Movies. Again, I've already mentioned this a few times, but it was just such a fun time. Like while I was reading this, I was constantly smiling to myself. Like I said, it's very cringy and cheesy, but in the best way possible. Like it's full of cliches, but I just had so much fun reading this. And the other one that I really didn't expect to have so much fun with is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Again, this just had me smiling to myself while I was reading it. The banter in this book between the two love interests is phenomenal. Phenomenal. My foot is asleep and my SD card just got full. That's a sign that I have been talking for way too long. But, oh my gosh, it's actually so asleep. Pins and needles. The next question is most beautiful book. So I'm going to base this from the list of books that I've read so far this year. And also keep in mind, I am not a special edition girly. I don't have any like fancy, beautiful Fairy Loot Illumicrate versions of books. I wish I did, but I just can't quite justify getting special editions. However, my personal favorite book that I own, just based on the cover, has to be Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score, because this is just the perfect book in my opinion. Like if I were to design a book cover for a romance book, I would like to think that mine would look somewhat like this. I love the background cover. I love how simple it is. I love the daisies, and if you've read it, you understand the daisy situation. I also just love it when you have a book and once you read it, the cover makes sense. That's like one of my favorite things, so I love that about it. But I just love a really simple but beautiful book. I also am not a huge fan of having any sort of people on my covers. Like even if they're cartoon, I still just don't want them there. Just give me something like this and I'll be happy. Book you want to read by the end of the year. I am basing this off the books that I already own, so like my physical TBR, and I have two that I'm really excited about. For romance, I cannot wait to read The Summer of Broken Rules. I don't really know why I haven't read this yet. I just haven't been quite in the mood, and I kind of want to wait till it warms up a bit here in Australia so I can really get those like summer reading vibes. Like we're in the middle of winter right now and it's just not the time for me. And the other one is completely different, but it is Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. I simply cannot wait to read this series. I think I'm going to be utterly obsessed with it, but I'm kind of waiting to finish some other fantasy series that I'm reading right now before I dive into this, because I think it's going to be quite the commitment, because it is 8 books I think. Have I already bought them all? Yes. Have I read a single one? No, but I'm sure I'm gonna love them. Again, can't wait for the found family in this, can't wait for more Sarah J Maas. This series is very high up on my physical TBR. And actually I also want to read the rest of the Addicted / Calloway Sister series. I have 3 books left and I'm really excited to read those books, but I'm also just gonna be so sad when it's over. I have pre-ordered the last 3 books, but I don't know when they're gonna come, because I did order the new covers because they're so beautiful. Hopefully I'll read them by the end of this year. And the last question is, what is your favorite book to movie / TV show adaptation? And this is kind of sad, but I haven't watched a single book to movie adaptation. Not a single one. To be fair, I'm not a huge movie or TV show girl. I'm not someone who really goes out of my way to go and watch adaptations, but I will tell you some of the ones that I think I may end up watching at some point. I don't know when. And ones that I'm excited about. So I'm really excited to watch The Summer I Turned Pretty. Literally have no reason why I haven't watched it yet, because I finished the trilogy, but I don't know, I'm not good at watching TV shows, so I just haven't watched it for some reason. But I'm excited to watch that. I'm also excited to see Where the Crawdads Sing, because I read that book I think last year and I really liked it, so I'm excited to watch the movie for that. Obviously I would love to watch It Ends With Us when that gets released. I've heard they're making a movie for The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I'm pretty sure they've already started filming / finished filming actually Daisy Jones and the Six as a TV show. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure. So there's honestly so many that I would like to watch at some point. I just don't know when, because I just don't really watch things like that, but I'm sure I'll watch some of them eventually. But those are all the questions that I'm answering today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Very different from my usual content. I do not remember the last time I filmed a tag video, so this was a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys might have heard about some new books that you want to read, or let me know your thoughts if you have read any of the books that I mentioned today. I mentioned so many today. Or if you have any recommendations for me, because I always want new recommendations, of course. But I hope you guys have a great day or night whenever you're watching this. I love you so much, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.